The barn smelled of dust and sweet hay, but my heart pounded louder than the creak of the old wooden floor. I was alone, or so I thought, sweeping the last of the morning's mess when the door slammed shut. The sound hit me like a gunshot, and I spun around to see him, Jasper Kane, the cowboy who'd been a shadow in my life for months, standing there, his hand still on the latch. Montana's endless skies had drawn me to this ranch a year ago. A 24-year-old city kid named Eli Harper, running from a life that never fit. I'd traded Chicago's concrete for Big Sky's open fields, hoping to find something real. But nothing prepared me for Jasper, 28, all sharp edges and quiet strength. A man who moved like he carried the weight of secrets heavier than the bales I hauled daily. He didn't speak at first. His blue eyes locked on mine, steady as the mountains, and I felt the air shift, like the moment before a storm. "Eli," he said finally, his voice low, rough like gravel. "We need to talk." He stepped forward, and the door's lock clicked behind him. My grip tightened on the broom. I'd spent months dodging the way his gaze made my pulse race, convincing myself it was nothing, just a lonely kid misreading a cowboy's kindness. But now, with the world shut out, there was nowhere to hide. I'd grown up in a house where feelings were buried deeper than winter snow. My dad's voice still echoed in my head. "Men don't feel like that. Eli, toughen up." I'd tried. God, I'd tried. But Jasper, with his calloused hands and quiet way of seeing through me, had cracked something open. He was the ranch owner's nephew, a loner who worked harder than anyone, yet carried a sadness that clung like dust. We'd shared late-night talks by the fire, passing a flask under starlit skies, but I'd always pulled back, afraid of what I felt. "Talk about what?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. I leaned the broom against the wall, crossing my arms to hide the tremble in my hands. Jasper took off his hat, setting it on a hay bale, his dark hair catching the slanted light. He looked at me like he was searching for something, and I wasn't sure I wanted him to find it. "You know what?" he said, stepping closer. The space between us felt alive, electric. "You've been running from this as long as I have." My breath caught. He wasn't wrong, but admitting it felt like stepping off a cliff. In a town like this, where folks clutched their Bibles and their grudges, what I felt for Jasper wasn't just forbidden, it was dangerous. I turned away, pretending to fuss with a pile of tack, but my hands shook. "You don't know what you're talking about," I muttered, the lie bitter on my tongue. Jasper's boots scuffed the floor as he closed the distance. I could feel the heat of him behind me, his presence like a fire I couldn't escape. "Eli, look at me." His voice was soft but firm, and when I didn't turn, his hand grazed my shoulder. It was the first time he'd touched me, and it burned through my shirt like a brand. I froze, my heart a wild thing in my chest. "I'm done pretending," he said. "And I think you are too." I turned, and his face was inches from mine, those blue eyes cutting through every wall I'd built. I wanted to shove him away, to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The barn, the world, everything fell away until it was just us, two men standing on the edge of something that could ruin us both. "Jasper," I whispered, my voice breaking, "what the hell are we doing?" He didn't answer with words. Instead, he leaned in, slow enough that I could have stopped him, but I didn't. His lips brushed mine, tentative, like he was testing the waters of a river that might drown us. And God help me, I kissed him back. The kiss was raw, desperate, like we'd both been starving for it. My hands found his shirt, gripping the fabric as if letting go would unravel me. But then reality crashed in the creak of the barn, the weight of the town outside, the life I'd built here that could burn to ash if anyone found out. I pulled back, breathless, my mind screaming to stop while my heart begged for more. Jasper, we can't, I said, stepping away, my voice barely above a whisper. This place, they'll destroy us. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He knew the truth as well as I did. This wasn't Chicago, where I'd seen pride flags wave in the wind. This was rural Montana, where love like ours was a sin whispered about in church pews. I know, he said, his voice heavy. But I can't keep living like this. Eli. Hiding. Pretending I don't feel what I feel. He reached for me again, but I stepped back. The distance between us a chasm I didn't know how to cross. Then what? I asked, my voice cracking. What happens when they find out? Your uncle owns this ranch. My job. My homite's all here. And you. I trailed off, the words too heavy to say. Jasper was tied to this land, to his family, to a life that didn't have room for us. He looked down, his hands clenching into fists. I don't have answers, Eli. But I know I'm tired of being a coward. His eyes met mine again, and the raw honesty there stole my breath. I've been running from this my whole life. I don't want to run anymore. The barn was silent except for the faint rustle of hay and the distant call of a hawk outside. I wanted to believe him, to believe we could carve out a space for ourselves in a world that wouldn't understand. But fear was a heavy thing, and it anchored me in place. I need time, I said finally, my voice barely audible. I can't, not yet. Jasper nodded, his expression unreadable. He picked up his hat, settling it back on his head, and for a moment, I thought he'd walk away. But then he looked back, his voice soft but steady. I'll wait, Eli. But not forever. He opened the barn door, and the sunlight poured in, blinding and harsh. As he stepped out, I was left alone with the echo of his words and the weight of a choice I wasn't ready to make. The days after that kiss were a blur of avoidance and ache. I threw myself into work, hauling feed and mending fences until my muscles screamed, hoping exhaustion would drown out the memory of Jasper's lips on mine. But every time I saw him riding across the fields or leaning against the stable door, my heart betrayed me, pounding like a drum I couldn't silence. The ranch was a small world, and secrets didn't stay buried long. Jasper's uncle, Tom Kane, ran the place with an iron grip and a preacher's morality. He was a good man, gruff but fair, but I'd heard him mutter about city folks and their ways when news of same-sex marriage laws hit the local paper. If he knew about me, about us, I'd be out of a job faster than a spooked horse. And Jasper, he'd lose more than that. Family was everything here, and Tom's approval was Jasper's tether to this land. I kept my distance, sticking to the barn or the far pastures. But Jasper wasn't making it easy. He'd find reasons to be near handing me a tool, brushing past me in the tack room, his fingers lingering just a second too long. Each touch was a spark, and I was terrified of the fire it could start. But God, I wanted it. I wanted him. And that want was tearing me apart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples, I was mucking stalls when Jasper appeared. He didn't say a word, just grabbed a pitchfork and started working beside me. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was like we were speaking without words, the rhythm of our work a conversation of its own. Finally, he broke the quiet. You're avoiding me, he said, not looking up from the straw he was tossing. His voice wasn't accusatory, just tired, like he'd been carrying the weight of my silence as much as I had. I stabbed my pitchfork into the ground, leaning on it to steady myself. I'm trying to keep us safe, I said, my voice low. You know what this place is like, Jasper. One wrong move, and we're done. He stopped working, his eyes finding mine in the dim light. "Safe," he said, a bitter edge to his voice. "You call this safe? Living like half a person, pretending you don't feel what you feel." He stepped closer, and I could see the strain in his face, the years of hiding etched into his features. "I've been doing that since I was a kid, Eli. I'm done." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was naive, that love didn't survive in a place like this. But the truth was, I was the naive one, thinking I could outrun what I felt. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice raw. "To throw everything away. To stand up in the middle of town and tell everyone I stopped." The word gaze sticking in my throat like a stone. Jasper's expression softened, but his eyes didn't waver. "I want you to be honest. With me. With yourself. I'm not asking for a parade, Eli. I'm asking for a chance." His words hit harder than I expected. A chance. It sounded so simple, but it felt like asking for the moon. I turned away, my hands gripping the pitchfork until my knuckles whitened. "I don't know how," I admitted, the confession spilling out before I could stop it. "I've spent my whole life hiding. My dad, he'd look at me like I was broken if he knew. And now, here, it's no different." Jasper set his pitchfork down and closed the distance between us. He didn't touch me this time, but his presence was enough to make my skin hum. "You're not broken," he said, his voice steady. "And you're not alone. Not anymore." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to lean into him, to let the walls I'd built crumble. But fear was a stubborn thing, and it held me back. "What if we get caught?" I whispered. "What if someone saw us in the barn? Or sees us now?" Jasper's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "Then we deal with it. Together." He reached out, his hand hovering near mine, but he stopped short, like he knew I wasn't ready. "I'm not saying it'll be easy, but I'd rather face the consequences than keep living a lie." The words hung between us, heavy with possibility and risk. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man beneath the cowboy hat, the one who'd spent years burying his truth, just like me. For the first time, I wondered if I could be brave enough to meet him halfway. Before I could answer, the sound of boots crunching on gravel snapped us both to attention. Jasper stepped back, grabbing his pitchfork like nothing had happened. Tom's voice called from outside, gruff and impatient. "Jasper. Eli. You boys done in there?" "Yeah, Uncle Tom," Jasper called back, his voice steady, but his eyes stayed on me, searching for an answer I didn't have. I nodded toward the door, and he hesitated before heading out, leaving me alone with the weight of his words. That night, I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, Jasper's voice echoing in my head. I'd rather face the consequences than keep living a lie. I thought of my life before the ranch, the years spent trying to be someone I wasn't. I thought of Jasper, and the way his touch had felt like freedom. And for the first time, I let myself imagine what it might be like to stop running. Sleep didn't come easy after that night. My dreams were a tangle of Jasper's eyes and the sound of that barn door closing, mixed with the dread of being found out. By morning, I was bleary-eyed and restless, the weight of indecision pressing on my chest like a stone. The ranch woke early, as always, the air sharp with the chill of late summer. I kept my head down, focusing on the rhythm of chores, feeding the horses, checking the fences, anything to avoid Jasper's gaze. But he was everywhere, a constant pull I couldn't escape. By noon, I was repairing a gate in the south pasture when he rode up on his mare, his silhouette sharp against the endless blue sky. "Eli," he said, dismounting with that easy grace that made my stomach twist. "You gonna keep running forever?" His tone was light, but his eyes were serious, cutting through the distance I tried to put between us. I hammered a nail into the gate, harder than necessary. I'm not running. I lied, my voice tight. I'm working. Some of us have to. He leaned against the fence, his hat casting a shadow across his face. You're scared. I get it. I've been there. He paused, his voice softening. But you don't have to do this alone. I stopped hammering, my hands shaking. You keep saying that, I said, turning to face him. But you don't know what it's like. You grew up here, Jasper. You've got family, roots. I'm just the hired help. If this goes wrong, I've got nothing to fall back on. His expression darkened, and for a moment, I thought I'd pushed him too far. But then he stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. You think I've got it easy? My whole life, I've been the good son, the good nephew, the guy who does what he's told. But I've been hiding just as long as you have, Eli. Longer, maybe. I swallowed hard, his words hitting too close to home. Then why now? I asked. Why risk everything? Because of you, he said simply, and the honesty in his voice stole my breath. I've spent years telling myself I could live without this, without you. But I can't. Not anymore. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I wanted to reach for him, to close the gap, but the sound of an approaching truck stopped me cold. It was Tom, his old Ford kicking up dust as it rolled toward us. Jasper stepped back, his face a mask of calm, but his eyes lingered on mine for a moment longer. Everything all right out here? Tom called, climbing out of the truck. His gaze flicked between us, and I felt a prickle of unease. Had he seen something? Heard something? Just fixing the gate, Jasper said, his voice steady. Eli's got it under control. Tom nodded, but his eyes stayed on me a beat too long. Good. We've got a buyer coming tomorrow. Need this place looking sharp. He climbed back into the truck, but not before giving us another glance, one that made my stomach churn. As the truck rumbled away, Jasper turned to me. He doesn't know, he said, reading my fear. But we need to be careful. Careful. I snapped, my frustration boiling over. That's what I've been trying to do, Jasper. But you keep pushing. And I stopped, my voice breaking. I don't know how to do this. He reached out, his hand brushing mine for just a second, a fleeting touch that grounded me. We'll figure it out, he said. Together. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I worked until my hands bled, trying to drown out the chaos in my head. But Jasper's words kept looping, a promise and a challenge I couldn't ignore. That night, as the ranch settled into silence, I found myself at the edge of the property, staring at the stars. Jasper appeared beside me, his presence as familiar as the night sky. You ever think about leaving? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Starting over somewhere else. He was quiet for a long time, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Used to, he said finally. But this land, it's part of me. And now, so are you. His words hit like a punch, and I turned to face him, the darkness hiding the flush in my cheeks. Jasper, I didn't know how to finish the sentence, but he didn't need me to. He stepped closer, his hand finding mine in the shadows, and for a moment, the world felt right. But the moment didn't last. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, and a voice called out Tom's voice, sharp and suspicious. Jasper, that you? We sprang apart, my heart racing as Jasper called back. Yeah, just checking the fence line. His voice was calm, but his hand squeezed mine one last time before letting go. As Tom's footsteps faded, I realized something had shifted inside me. Fear was still there, but so was something strong, a spark of courage, kindled by Jasper's touch. Maybe, just maybe, I could be brave enough to fight for this. The next morning, the ranch buzzed with tension. The buyer Tom mentioned was due by noon, and everyone was on edge, scrubbing down stalls and polishing tack like our lives depended on it. I threw myself into the work, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Jasper's hand in mine, the way his words had anchored me in the dark. I was starting to believe we could find a way, but the fear of being caught clung to me like damp earth. Jasper was everywhere and nowhere always nearby, but never too close. He'd catch my eye across the yard, a quick glance that said more than words could, but we kept our distance. Tom was watching, his sharp eyes missing nothing. I couldn't shake the feeling that he suspected something, and it made every moment feel like walking on a tightrope. By mid-morning, I was in the barn, stacking hay bales, when Jasper slipped in. He didn't say anything, just started helping, his movements steady and sure. The silence between us was comfortable now, like we'd found a rhythm that didn't need words. But then he paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and looked at me with an intensity that made my heart skip. "Last night," he said, his voice low, "you didn't run. That's something." I set a bale down, my hands shaking slightly. "I wanted to," I admitted. "But you make it hard to keep running." He smiled, a rare, real smile that softened his edges. "Good," he said, "because I'm not going anywhere." Before I could respond, the barn door creaked open, and Sarah, one of the other hands, poked her head in. "Eli, Jasper, buyer's here. Tom wants everyone out front." Her tone was casual, but her eyes lingered on us, and I wondered what she saw. We followed her out, joining the small crowd gathered around a sleek black SUV. The buyer, a middle-aged man in a suit that looked out of place among the dust and denim, was talking to Tom, gesturing at the fields. Jasper stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, but not so close it would draw attention. Still, I caught Tom's glance, sharp and assessing, and my stomach twisted. The buyer's visit dragged on, a parade of handshakes and small talk. I stayed quiet, my mind racing with what-ifs. What if Tom had seen us last night? What if Sarah had noticed something in the barn? The weight of those questions pressed harder as the day wore on. That evening, after the buyer left, Tom called a meeting in the main house. The hands gathered in the living room, the air thick with the smell of coffee and tension. Tom stood at the head of the room, his face unreadable. "Good work today," he said, his voice gruff. "Buyer's impressed. But we've got a problem." My heart sank. Jasper shifted beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, a silent reassurance. Tom's eyes swept the room, lingering on us for a moment before moving on. "Someone's been slacking on the north fence line," he said. "Posts are loose. Wires down. I want it fixed by tomorrow." Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. As the meeting broke up, Tom called out, "Eli, Jasper, stay back." The other hands filed out, and the room felt suddenly too small. Tom leaned against the table, his arms crossed. "You two been spending a lot of time together," he said, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "Anything I should know?" My mouth went dry, but Jasper spoke up, his voice steady. "Just working, Uncle Tom. Eli's a good hand. We get things done." Tom's gaze flicked to me, and I nodded, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Yeah, just trying to keep up with Jasper." He studied us for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, Just keep your heads on the job. Don't need distractions. He turned away, but the warning in his voice lingered. Outside, Jasper grabbed my arm, pulling me behind the shed. He doesn't know, he said, his voice urgent. But he's fishing. We need to be smarter. Smarter, I hissed, my fears spilling over. Jasper, he's your uncle. If he even suspects. He won't. Jasper cut in, his hand tightening on my arm. Not if we're careful. But I meant what I said. Eli, I'm not giving this up. Not you. His words were a lifeline, but they also terrified me. I pulled away, my heart pounding. I need to think, I said, turning toward the bunkhouse. Jasper didn't follow, but I could feel his eyes on me, steady and unyielding. That night, I lay awake, torn between the life I'd built here and the one I wanted with Jasper. The ranch was my home, but Jasper was starting to feel like home too. And that scared me more than anything. The next few days were a tightrope walk. Jasper and I kept our distance in front of others, but stolen moments, a brush of hands in the tack room, a shared look across the corral kept the spark alive. Every touch was a risk, every glance a gamble, but I was starting to care less about the consequences and more about the way Jasper made me feel alive. We were assigned to fix the north fence line together, a job that took us far from the main house. Out there, with only the wind and the wide Montana sky as witnesses, we could be ourselves, even if just for a moment. Jasper worked beside me, his sleeves rolled up, his forearms tanned and strong. I caught myself staring, and he grinned, catching me off guard. Keep looking at me like that, and we'll never finish this fence, he teased, his voice low and warm. I flushed, turning back to the post I was hammering. Just focus, cowboy, I muttered, but a smile tugged at my lips. For the first time, I let myself enjoy the moment, the ease of being with him without fear. But the peace didn't last. That afternoon, as we headed back to the ranch, we found Sarah waiting by the barn, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. Tom's looking for you too, she said, her eyes flicking between us. He's not happy. My stomach dropped. Jasper's face stayed calm, but I saw the tension in his jaw. What's he want? He asked. Sarah shrugged, but there was something in her eyes, curiosity, maybe, or suspicion. Didn't say. Just said to find you. We followed her to the main house, my heart pounding with every step. Tom was in his office, papers scattered across his desk. He looked up as we entered, his face hard. Close the door, he said, and my blood ran cold. Jasper shut the door, and we stood there, shoulder to shoulder, like kids called to the principal's office. Tom leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. Got a call from a neighbor today, he said. Said he saw two fellas out by the north fence. Looked like they were close. My heart stopped. Jasper didn't flinch, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. We were working, he said, his voice steady. Fixing the fence, like you asked. Tom's gaze shifted to me, and I forced myself to meet his eyes. That's so, Eli? He asked, his tone deceptively calm. Yeah, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Just doing our job. Tom studied us for a long moment, then leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. This ranch is my life, he said. My family's life. I don't care what folks do on their own time, but I won't have anything jeopardizing my name. You understand? Yes, sir, Jasper said, and I nodded, my throat tight. Tom dismissed us, but his words hung over me like a storm cloud. Outside, Jasper pulled me aside, his voice low, He's guessing, he said. He doesn't know anything for sure. But he might. I shot back, my fear boiling over. Jasper, if someone saw us, then we deal with it, he said, his voice fierce. But I'm not letting you go because of what some neighbor thinks he saw. I wanted to believe him, to hold on to the courage he seemed to have in spades. But fear was a heavy thing, and it was pulling me under. I need time, I said, my voice breaking. I can't lose everything. Jasper. He looked at me, his eyes full of something I couldn't name hope. Maybe. Or hurt. You won't, he said. But you've got to decide what you're fighting for. He walked away, leaving me standing there, torn between the man I was falling for and the life I was terrified to lose. That night, I sat on the porch of the bunkhouse, staring at the stars, and made a choice. I didn't know if it was the right one, but it was the only one I could live with. I woke the next morning with a fire in my chest, a resolve I hadn't felt before. I was tired of running, tired of letting fear dictate my life. Jasper was right, I had to decide what I was fighting for. And I was starting to realize it was him. The ranch was quiet, the early light casting long shadows across the fields. I found Jasper in the stable, brushing down his mare, his movements steady but his eyes distant. When he saw me, he paused, his hand still on the brush, waiting for me to speak. I'm in, I said, my voice low but firm. Whatever this is, whatever it costs, I am in. His face softened, and for a moment, I thought he'd smile, but he just nodded, like he'd been waiting for me to catch up. Okay, he said, his voice quiet. But we've got to be smart. No more risks like the fence line. I nodded, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. For the first time, I felt like I was choosing my life, not just surviving it. We didn't touch, didn't dare, but the look in his eyes was enough to make my skin hum. The next few days were a careful dance. We worked together when we could, stealing moments in the quiet corners of the ranch, a shared smile, a whispered word. But Tom's suspicion hung over us like a shadow, and I could feel the eyes of the other hands on us, watching, waiting for a slip. One afternoon, as we were unloading feed from a truck, Sarah pulled me aside. Eli, she said, her voice low, you and Jasper, you're careful, right? My heart stopped, but I kept my face neutral. Careful about what? I asked, my voice steady. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. Just be careful, she said finally. This town talks, and Tom listens. I nodded, my throat tight, and she walked away, leaving me with a sinking feeling. That night, I told Jasper what she'd said. He listened, his jaw tight, then nodded. She's not wrong, he said. But she's not against us either. Sarah's got her own secret, she gets it. His words gave me hope, but they also sharpened my fear. If Sarah had noticed something, others might too. We doubled down, keeping our distance in public, but the pull between us was stronger than ever. Every stolen moment felt like a victory. Every touch a rebellion against the world that wanted to keep us apart. But rebellion came with a cost. One evening, as I was finishing up in the barn, Tom appeared, his face like thunder. Eli, he said, his voice low and dangerous. We need to talk. My heart raced, but I followed him to his office, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. He shut the door, leaning against it like he was guarding the exit. I heard something today, he said, his eyes boring into mine. About you and my nephew. I froze, my mouth dry. Sir, don't. He cut me off, his voice sharp. I don't want lies. I want the truth. Are you and Jasper involved? The word hung in the air, heavy and accusing. I wanted to deny it, to protect Jasper, to protect myself. But then I thought of Jasper's words: I'd rather face the consequences than keep living a lie. And I made a choice. Yes, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. I love him. Tom's face didn't change, but his eyes darkened, and for a moment, I thought he'd hit me. Instead, he turned away, his hands clenched. Get out, he said, his voice low. Pack your things. You're done here. The words hit like a blow, but I stood my ground. What about Jasper? I asked, my voice shaking. Tom's jaw tightened. That's my business, he said. Now go. I left the office, my heart pounding, and found Jasper waiting outside. He'd heard everything. His face was pale, but his eyes were fierce. You didn't have to do that, he said, his voice rough. Yes, I did, I said, and for the first time, I felt free, even as my world fell apart. The bunkhouse felt emptier than ever as I packed my things. My hands moved on autopilot, folding clothes, stuffing them into my duffel, but my mind was with Jasper. I'd told Tom the truth, and now I was paying the price. But the real fear wasn't losing my job, it was losing Jasper. He found me before I could finish packing, his face a storm of emotions. You shouldn't have done that, he said, his voice raw. You didn't have to take the fall. I zipped my bag, turning to face him. I'm tired of hiding. Jasper, you were right. I couldn't keep living a lie. He stepped closer, his hands clenched like he was fighting the urge to reach for me. And now what? You're just gonna leave? I didn't have an answer. The ranch was my home, but Jasper was my heart, and I didn't know how to reconcile the two. What about you? I asked. What's Tom gonna do? Jasper's jaw tightened. He's pissed. Told me to get my head straight or get out. But I'm not leaving you, Eli. Not now. His words were a lifeline, but they also terrified me. Jasper, this is your home. Your family. You can't throw that away for me. It's not just for you, he said, his voice fierce. It's for me. For us. I've spent my whole life trying to be what they wanted. I'm done. Before I could respond, the door swung open, and Sarah stood there, her eyes wide. You two need to go, she said, her voice urgent. Tom's talking to some of the hands. They're not happy. My heart sank. The hands were a tight-knit group, loyal to Tom and the ranch. If they turn on us, it wouldn't just be about losing a job, it could get dangerous. Jasper grabbed my arm, his grip firm. Come on, he said. We're getting out of here. We slipped out the back, moving through the shadows toward Jasper's truck. The night was quiet, but the air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. We climbed in, and Jasper started the engine, his hands steady despite the chaos. Where to? He asked, his eyes on me. I didn't know. I'd come to Montana to find myself, and now I was leaving with nothing but the man beside me. Anywhere, I said finally. As long as it's with you. He nodded, and we drove into the night, the ranch fading in the rearview mirror. We didn't speak, but his hand found mine, and the warmth of it was enough to keep the fear at bay. For now. We ended up at a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one asked questions. Jasper paid in cash, and we collapsed onto the creaky bed, the weight of the day settling over us. What now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jasper turned to me, his eyes soft but determined. "We start over," he said. "Together." It sounded so simple, but I knew it wouldn't be. The world outside this room was still the same hard, judgmental, unforgiving. But as I looked at Jasper, I realized I didn't care. For the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The motel room was dim, the only light coming from a flickering neon sign outside. Jasper and I sat on the edge of the bed, our shoulders brushing, the silence between us heavy with possibility. We'd left everything behind the ranch, the life we'd known, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. "I'm sorry," I said finally, my voice breaking the quiet, "for dragging you into this." Jasper turned to me, his eyes fierce. "You didn't drag me anywhere, Eli. I chose this. I chose you." His words settled into me, warm and steady, and I leaned into him, my head resting on his shoulder. For the first time, I let myself believe we could make it. Not just survive, but really live, as ourselves. The next morning, we sat in a diner, sipping coffee and mapping out our future. Jasper talked about heading west, maybe to California, where the world was a little kinder to people like us. I listened, my heart swelling with hope and fear in equal measure. It wouldn't be easy, money was tight, and we'd both left behind everything we'd known. But as I looked at Jasper, his face lit by the morning sun, I knew I'd follow him anywhere. We spent the next few weeks on the road, moving from town to town, picking up odd jobs where we could. It was hard, but it was ours. We laughed more, touched more, lived more. In a small coastal town, we found a cheap apartment, a place to start over. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. One night, as we sat on the roof, watching the stars, Jasper took my hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked, his voice soft. "Leaving the ranch?" I thought about the dust of Montana, the weight of fear, the life I'd left behind. Then I looked at Jasper, his face open and unguarded, and I knew the answer. "No," I said, squeezing his hand. "Not for a second." He smiled, pulling me close, and we sat there, wrapped in each other in the night sky. The world wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But we'd found something better, a life where we could be ourselves, where love wasn't a secret to be buried. And that was worth everything. As the stars shone above us, I realized that the barn, that moment when Jasper closed the door and took off his hat, wasn't just the start of our story. It was the moment we chose to be free. And no matter what came next, we'd face it together. Two cowboys carving out a place in a world that was learning, slowly, to make room for us.